Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can.
Oh yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
No worries. So yeah, ask me any questions you want, or like what did you want to discuss in this meeting?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So first, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I mean, it's kind of short notice, but we were really like interested in your work with computer science and math. And yeah, we just had some questions about your
Sure.
work. So what can I address you by?
Oh, I
Uh,
just go by Robert. Just go by my
Robert.
first.
Okay, okay, Robert. All right. What year are you in your PhD right now?
I just finished my first year.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And you're at Caltech.
Yes. I'm a
Okay,
Caltech.
that's cool. All right. Well, yeah. So we can get started here. So
Hmm?
yeah, great to see you and thank you for your time. I think it
No
should
worries.
be 40 minutes here. Do you mind if I record this so I can share it to interested people?
Sure. Yeah, you can go
Okay.
ahead and do that.
Yeah, the only questions I have are about like your papers that you've already published. So,
Mhm.
um
Sure.
So maybe just to start here, do you think you could tell me like a little bit about yourself and your journey in computer science and math throughout the years?
Okay, sure. I so ever since like middle school and high school, I really like solving a lot of math problems. Like I really like, so I grew up in the Middle East actually. I like participating in a lot of the Olympiads in the Middle East, and I like just really liked problem solving in general. I think math was something which I always wanted to go into, and I wanted to be a math professor all of my life, kind of in
Mhm.
the sense. Computer science was kind of just the natural things. Like if you're like a math kind of person, if you just want to program, like I think for programming some algorithms and all was just like thing. And then when I went for my undergrad in Canada at Alberta, I really got more into like proofs of mathematics and like real analysis proofs and such like that. I thought it was super fun. And research was very interesting to me because research is the way where you can kind of like just pursue what you're really passionate about under a supervisor. And that's like in my undergrad, I did a lot of research. Computer science specific, I was really interested in theory at first, but then I switched more into like machine learning and all this. And I thought that was pretty cool. I did a lot of reinforcement learning in my undergrad under Rich Sutton and Martha White and Adam White. So they were all part of this like reinforcement learning and artificial intelligence lab in Alberta. And there we were like creating these kind of AI agents for solving Atari games and all this. So that was pretty cool. I started working with my supervisor Animan Kumar at Caltech in 2022, and then I was really interested because her full focus is on actually AI4Science. So she wants to kind of use AI to actually kind of impact a lot of big applications in science, and I thought that was pretty good, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
it's pretty cool to do like math stuff, like real analysis, pure algebra, like no doubt in that. But I thought like actually making big impact work with this
Sure.
would be like really cool. So Anima was like perfect. Very grateful that she accepted me and some other schools, but I chose Caltech at the end because I thought it was a really great place for a very good research environment because it's a very, very small school and everyone is doing
Right.
research all the time. So I
Right.
was really happy to come here. Over here in my first year, I just did a lot of courses in grad school and just kind of pursuing a lot of different research directions, figuring out what my thesis is going to be. But it's primarily going to be like AF for science and AF for math. So
Okay.
technically, it's like my whole journey has been like always trying to do this, like not switching around, but like I've always been
Right. Right.
interested in like, math and
Right.
computers.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I thought, yeah, I know you were working a little bit with theory and then you switched over to AI. So I think
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I did have would you say there was like a moment that really fueled that switch between your
Mhm.
theory to AI or machine learning or application based, or would you say it was more gradual just by learning more?
I think it was just more gradual. Like I started my undergrad doing a lot of like math theory research, like a lot of like Fourier analysis, functional analysis,
Sure.
stuff like that. And I still use them in research. I mean, no doubt, like I will not say that I don't use that. It's just that I don't want to primarily focus on that, right? Like my
Right.
primary focus is now to be like building theory, which can actually create a lot of good application projects in the sense. That's kind of so it is more of a gradual switch. It's not just like, oh, I'll just stop doing theory. It's just
Right.
that my supervisor also has a very big focus in the group is that you do theory, but theory which can impact the applications in the sense. So it's
Sure.
not like just pure like machine learning theory or like theory which has no impact. Like I mean, sure that research is good. There's no doubt about it. And I used to do that as once, but it's just that I think like applications are also something really important to me, and I think it
Right.
has a big impact in the sense.
So one question I did have was what do you maybe this is a vague question here, but what do
Sure,
you really like mean by the AI for math, AI for science? Because
sure.
typically when I've maybe like heard someone else talk about AI, they'll talk about, specifically they're interested in AI and climate change or AI
Yes,
and something else. So it's a little more in depth. So I'm just curious to know about like what would you say more specifically is your focus?
yes, for sure. Okay, so for me in particular, when I say AI for science, at least for me right now, is to actually solve and make simulations for partial differential equations much more faster.
Okay. Hmm.
So solving PD is much more faster. A good example is that if you have like a normal PD, basically you would need a numerical solver to solve that PD, and that would
Right.
take a lot of time. What we do is basically we gather a lot of training data from a lot of like solved PDs using numerical solvers, and we train like some machine learning models. In our group, specifically focus on something called neural operators. I can go into that later, but just machine learning models which can kind of solve, which can learn from these generated data, and then you hope that when you give me a new PD of the same kind of class, you can just evaluate this machine learning model on the PD and never have to actually retrain a numerical solver.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's what I mean by actually numerically, like using machine learning AI for science, for me at least, so it's PDs. But climate change is one example where PD is important because everything in climate change is
Right.
actually solving PDs. So the
Right. Right.
application will be like climate forecasting, carbon capture. Um, AI for math, on the other hand, what I'm interested in proving is, so in the math community, there's a kind of functional programming language called Lean, which is basically how do you formalize theorems in a language. And
Right.
what
I
we
think
are doing.
that was what the DeepMind thing came out on, right? They were
Yeah,
using
yeah,
all
that's
the lean
exactly.
stuff.
So the
Right.
recent the alpha proof what they had basically was lean. So they actually kind of built up on our work where in our group we created the lean copilot and lean dojo project where
Oh,
they
really?
combined
Wow.
LLMs plus lean to do that. And so they basically had enough compute and scale and they found a good data set and they just scaled it up to a million of GPUs. I
Right.
mean,
Right. Right.
we had technically the same idea, but we just don't have the GPUs and the resources to
Right.
build a full million. So
Hmm.
basically that's like the AI for math which I'm interested in. So there's AI for science, AI for math. I'm also very interested in how do you train these efficient models really efficiently, basically. How do you build
Okay.
these models and how do you train them? And that's what I mean
Right.
by AI for science. So AI for science, I know it's a very broad term. People do like AI for protein design, AI for, but I
Right.
primarily focus on AI for science for partial differential equations in a
Right.
sense, because I think that's a very fundamental thing in the universe. Because everything's kind of modeled by a PDE, basically.
Right. Well, yeah, I think maybe I don't think for your specific line of study, I don't think one category would capture it all because you're working in efficiency, PDEs,
Yeah,
math, it's all over the place. I think that's
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah,
Lots of work,
yeah.
lots of complex stuff there.
Yeah, it is pretty cool stuff. It's a very growing field, right? I mean, I would say like for all like undergrads and like high schools like you, if you want to like get into some good project, I think these are all like big. I mean, I'm sure I know like when I was your age also in undergrad, like I think everyone is like going into like the LLM hype. I think
Right,
sure there's no doubt in that. Like I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, there's no like, but I feel like AI for science in general or AI for math is like some things which are like, can actually kind of help us humans to make much more bigger impacts, right? I think these are like
right,
something much more fundamental in the sense. And I
right,
mean there are much more harder problems, not as well structured, but I think that it's kind of unique. Like if you find good mentors and you have when you go for your undergrad, I'm assuming many of you will be applying for colleges right now for undergrad.
right.
I think this is a good direction to kind of explore basically.
Hmm.
It's pretty
Yeah, I think maybe one of the things that stops people from getting into the space immediately is partially maybe the difficulty of all these concepts. Like these are
yeah,
already from like LLMs already have such a big framework around them that
yeah,
it's not as hard to jump into.
yeah,
Whereas like the work that you're doing, first you have to understand the partial differential equations, which is
yeah.
already a hard
A
step
very
in that
hard topic.
process. Right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
completely get that. For sure. Like I think that's like I think it's like when you do in your undergrad only you can when you're like a math major or like even if you're doing like engineering or like physics or something like you will
Mhm.
learn eventually like once you take a bunch of math courses, right? You will learn this. And I think it's a fair point, but I think it's also good to like just be aware that there are like different kind of areas to
Right.
explore. Not that
Right.
everyone
Right.
should jump into the LLM hype train. I think that's kind of what I meant to say, like
Yeah.
the sense.
Be
Um,
flexible almost. Just
Exactly, yeah.
right.
Be always curious to learn, basically. I think that's kind of the mindset we should always have.
Right. Okay, yeah. So So my big question here was, we were really interested on some of your recent work on, like you were talking about neural operators for
Yeah.
solving like the PDEs.
Yes.
Um, so I was wondering, th it is a relatively advanced topic, but we thought that was really interesting, and I was wondering if you could maybe, I don't know how easy it would be to give a simple overview, but if you could try to give like a
Sure,
simple overview of that.
I can try. I think I have some slides, so let me open that up one
Sure.
second.
You can screen share too if you'd like.
Yeah, oh, okay, let me open it. Do I have this? I'll just give a little bit brief history, not something. Let's see if these are the slides. Okay, I think I have okay. Mhm. Okay, I think this should be okay. So these are like from, I'll just share my screen. So these are from kind of one of the presentations I recently gave. Um, I won't get into the more detail. Oh, sorry. Where is the presentation? Can you see my screen?
I can. Yeah,
Yeah.
full screen
So
now.
yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to give a very big detail on this topic. This is just the more advanced topic, but I can give a little bit brief history later. But oh, why can't I move to the next screen? Okay. So maybe I'll just go a little bit about neural operators. I think that's kind of the whole focus of Anima's group. So maybe a
Sure.
little bit of that. So okay. So I guess since you are a part of the AI club, I would assume you guys know what a neural network is. Like
Yep.
they're mappings between. So generally, most structurally, they are kind of mappings between finite dimensional vector spaces to each other. So an example would be, I give you an example, an image, an input as an image, and then my output would be like, say, is it a dog or a cat or some kind of
Right.
like classification, or it could also be kind of like another kind of vector, right? It could be a regression task or something like that. So
Right.
that's
Right.
like neural networks. So they map finite dimensional vector space to each other, and that what basically what that means is like you're giving me a vector, and I'm taking a vector output in this.
Right.
Neural operators are kind of a generalization of neural networks in the sense that they kind of map functions to functions. So what I
Okay.
mean by that is you give me an input as a function, I actually get a function back outside of this.
Hmm.
Theoretically, that's what it means. Obviously, in computer, you kind of discretize a function onto a certain grid points, and
Right.
then so what an example would be is like I give you say in terms of a video, I'll give you the first 10 time frames. I'll ask my neural operator to predict the next time frame. So
Okay.
I'm giving you a snapshot of the first 10 images. I'm asking you to predict the next 10, like 11th image in this sense. So that's kind
Sure.
of what. So that's like a function to function mapping because I can kind of give you new images and as inputs and get new outputs in the sense. And
Right.
that's what basically maps. So theoretically, in mathematical terms, basically you have this kind of fixed function f. You're trying to learn this function u, and L is kind of like a differential operator. I mean, in terms of ODs, it would be just like this, like an input function to an output function, maybe a little bit more easier to compared to a partial differential equation.
Sure.
But basically, ODs and PDE solvers will just kind of learn like these they'll like kind of discretize the functions and just kind of learn this kind of mapping. But neural
Right.
operators can learn this directly, this operator, this mapping directly. And so
Right.
that's kind of what they say. The only key takeaway to just reemphasize that neural networks map finite dimensional spaces, so vector to vector. Neural operators just learn kind of like functions to functions, basically. And that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what a gist of a neural operator is. There's more
Sure.
technical details. The one kind of technical detail which I think is important to understand is that they have this kind of property called discretization invariance, which kind of basically means that so as an image is kind of like you have like say 421 by 421 resolution, right? So you have this kind of
Sure.
grid in the sense, right? If you keep on making that grid more finer, basically you means like you keep on making your image resolution much more, like say 4000 by 4000, like 4K pixels to 8K to 16K. As soon as you keep on increasing the resolution, you kind of learn the true operator which kind of maps these function spaces. Maybe a little bit technical, but just basically means that as soon as you so this image on the right, this mesh refinement, as soon as you make this
Right.
kind of grid more finer, adding more points, you kind of converge to a true ground operator basically, which is what we want to learn. Because once you get
Sure.
that ground operator, you give me a new PD of the same class, I just apply that operator onto the PD and I get the solution.
Okay, I see, I see, I
I
see,
never have
I
to
see.
integrate. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, there is a full whole space of neural operators. I think one of the main from our group is called the Fourier neural operators, where basically a very simple diagram. So this the architecture on the right is the diagram. What I do is basically you have this kind of input function. I have this kind of two branch layer network where my bottom layer is just a simple MLP, so multi-layer perceptron, and my top layer is where kind of the magic happens. Over there,
Right.
we first take the Fourier transform of the function, so you get a bunch of frequencies ordered by how strong they are. You kind of cut off these high frequency details. And a good analogy why I would make to a general public when I talk about this is that imagine you have a painting, okay? The high frequency details of that painting are actually kind of the details on the painting, like the very important like details, like maybe say the nose or the eyebrows or something like that. But the low frequency components are what kind of captures the whole picture, like the whole
Sure.
thing. And that's
Right, like
what's
the general
important.
structure.
Exactly, yes, exactly. Good point. That's what's important to learn. We don't want to kind of learn these high frequency because it's kind of like noise if you keep on learning them for a bunch of data.
Right, like overfitting almost.
Exactly. So if you learn them really high, you overfit. If you learn them really low, you kind of underfit on your data set.
Sure.
And that's where the magic happens. So you basically, you see, you have your input function, you take the Fourier transform, you apply like a linear transform, just basically cut off the high frequency components, and you take the inverse Fourier transform back. And then the below trunks, you kind of do this MLP, and then you just add this point to it. And then you
Right.
apply nonlinear activation, and you can do this for a bunch of Fourier layers. And that's kind of the classical architecture for a Fourier neural operator space.
Sure. Could you maybe briefly go over like the idea of a MLP?
Oh, so an MLP is basically a multi-layer perceptron is basically you could have like say two input neurons and then you have like a bunch of neurons in a hidden layer and then you kind of just connect them using a weight mix. Like it depends on the number of connections you want and like how do you project. But basically it's just you try to learn like a non-linear kind of mapping in neural network.
Okay, okay,
So a
okay.
neural
No,
network,
I see, I see.
exactly.
Okay,
So
for sure.
a traditional neural network, like just classical, is first one you will ever learn will be a classical multi-layer perceptron, which is the
Right.
simplest MLP basically.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I had that picture in my head, but yeah, okay, thank you.
no. I mean, you can also replace MLP by something else, like you can put CNNs there, whatever. It doesn't matter. But
Okay,
we
yeah,
kind of
see that's what I was thinking, but okay, yeah. All right,
no.
great.
Um, so why we don't actually have a CNN is what again the fact is that we want this property to remain, that is mesh refinement. So actually convolution neural networks do not possess this property in the sense that if you actually train on say 256 by 256 image resolution, you actually cannot test it on a 1024 by 1024 image. It's not
Sure.
possible because you're fixed to the training resolution.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
neural operators, on the other hand, like FNOs and all, you can train them on say 64 by 64, and I can test on whatever image size you want. It's
Mm-hmm.
invariant to the mesh in the sense. That's the key problem. Invariance to the mesh and discretization invariance in the sense that you make it more finer, you converge with the operator is a very special property about neural operators. These are like the two big takeaways if I were to give the group, like your team, basically about that. Is just that it's a very special property of neural optics, and which is what we want to maintain. It's
Right.
important because in fluid dynamics, when you're trying to understand turbulent flow and all, you want to capture these fine details on very high resolution images.
Right.
It may not matter much to you. You may think in like say like classifying a dog or an ant, like a cat or a dog or something like that, but for like PDs and all, it's really important to capture these fine details of very high resolution.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so this is a very simple FNO architecture. You can kind of see the difference. So in CNN, you have these local convolutions, right? You have these kernels going over your image. But when you do a Fourier transform, you have a global kind of convolution. You understand the whole filter in general. So that's basically what neural operators and a very special architecture called FNO. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff. Like there's a foundation model for PDs, which I was part of. I think maybe I can give a little bit brief history about this. But basically, this is I would assume you guys know about a transformer, you know about the structure
Yeah.
of a transformer. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So again, transformers, the attention mechanism is again in finite dimensional spaces. This has been generalized to function spaces. So now your
Mm.
keys, queries, and values are all acting on functions. You can maybe I'll just go over the whole layer architecture. Basically, these KQVs, right? I actually remember the earlier model I showed, the FNOs, the Fourier neural operators.
Yeah. Yes.
They're actually Fourier neural operators. They're not just a weight
Mm.
matrix. So they're actually a model inside a big model in a sense, kind of.
Yeah,
But this is like a whole outage. I can talk about this later, but I think it's not worth it. It's a very big like
sure.
foundational model. But yeah, I think that's kind of a brief history about neural operators. There's a lot of good blogs on there on neural operators, especially from my friend Zongi. Maybe the references. One second. Oh, oops. References. So you can look at Zongi's kind of website and his blog. He has a really he's the main author on FNOs and like kind of the creator of the field. But yeah, so that's basically about neural operators, basically.
Right. No, I think that's really fascinating work. The fact that like I think you can really see the application, like you were mentioning in fluid dynamics, that it's a very unique quality that it's like kind of like independent to the size,
Yes.
the original size. I think that's really interesting because some projects that I've done in the past, they're not really like as you can't really like generalize them to cat and dog, but they still are very much constrained by the input. Like what you trained it
Exactly.
on,
Yes.
you have to have that or else it
Yes.
just won't work. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really interesting property that the FNOs have, and I think that's actually not just FNOs, all neural operators have.
Most of the
That's
neural,
really
yeah, we want that properties because it's very important. You kind of want to like test on high resolution, low resolution. So basically, accuracy doesn't drop by a significant amount. Like
mhm.
if you plot like the resolution by the accuracy, CNNs will keep on. Well, it depends on how you train them, but as soon as you train on a fixed resolution, say 64, and then you keep on testing, your accuracy will keep on actually dropping in the sense,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
neuroautism will try to keep it consistent, basically, which is what we
Right.
want.
Because it's a function.
Exactly, you're
It's
learning kind of a function, so you can kind of create it at any point in your domain, basically.
right. Is this the difference? Would you like, is this continuous versus discrete kind of? Is that
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
okay? Okay, right.
Exactly.
Right. I think that's really interesting because in my head I was trying to think of what you were like describing between math, science, and machine learning, and I was trying to think of something that would, intersect
Mhm.
all three of them, and that was like I don't think there's another way to intersect all three of them so elegantly. That was really cool.
And
Right.
also a good thing is that for like you undergrads and like you for high schools and all, like I know it's hard to probably get into the technical details and all. I mean, I'm sure once you get into college, you can definitely do like your undergrad research programs and all. But the whole field of kind of function learning in spaces like neural operators and all this stuff is actually very underexplored compared to the LLM field or Gen AI,
Right.
like diffusion models and all, right? Like, I mean, it's still a growing field. There's a lot of good low-hanging fruit. And I know in the US, there's not a lot of US labs that are actually focused. So I know Animal Lab at Caltech has a huge focus. There is one lab at Brown University. There's one lab at MIT and Harvard. And I know there's not a lot compared to the NLP folks and all, but I think there's a good amount of chance to kind of explore because I think AI4Science will be definitely the future. I mean, there's a lot of kind of movements towards it. Chicago has a huge lab. If any of you go to like U Chicago or something like that, even U Michigan has a big lab there. So good opportunity to explore a lot of good field, and I think it's going to grow much more in the next few years because
Yeah,
climate
I think so
forecasting will be the
too.
crux. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's maybe one of the reasons it hasn't grown yet is because people don't really like because of the fact that it's so high level, maybe people don't understand the implications of this kind of technology yet. So actually, one question that I had branching off of that was, do you think you could give me like a real world example of where this would be useful? I know you touched on fluid
Yes.
dynamics, but is there like maybe a like an end-to-end example that you could give on where a neural operator would come into
Yeah,
play?
I'll open my friend's blog actually, and then you can kind of you can look at all his the whole kind of applications where it has been used. One thing. Project pages. This one I forgot. Okay, so I think this is a good blog. I think you should kind of share. I think he's amazing at this. But let me put this in the chat just if you really want to look at this. Um,
Yeah, I just searched up Zhongli's website.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of applications. I mean, this blog has not been updated for 3 years, but there's weather forecasting, coronavirus,
Wow.
CO2 migration, that's the carbon capture. So NVIDIA, so
Mhm.
because Anima was the previous AI director for NVIDIA, my supervisor, we have a lot of collaborations with NVIDIA, crystal plasticity, seismic wave. So just look at weather forecasting, right? This one was the first kind of AI model which could actually um, predict weather forecasting really fast and almost like 10,000 times faster than standard numerical solver. So this is a big
Wow.
thing, like it can actually, it's an AI model which is actually being deployed in the US government, like kind of like weather forecasting, like I
Wow.
said,
Hmm.
using neural operators. ForecastNet is actually a bunch of adaptive Fourier neural operators, which is a variant of FNOs, but with more kind of transformer architecture in the background in the sense. So it's not that
So,
hard to understand the architecture. It's just it's just you follow like a kind of like decoder, encoder kind of from a transformer architecture. There's
right.
like a lot of applications. Like if you search up FNO, I think it's grown over like 2K citations right now. There's a lot of good things like coastal flood prediction, PD control. So in robotics and controls, you can kind of learn the underlying dynamics. Um,
Sure.
there's a good kind of NVIDIA speech. I think this was the video for neural operators. Yeah, you can just watch it on 40.
The Fourier neural operator PhysXML model predicts the precise path of hurricanes a full 4 days in advance and can provide near real-time updates as conditions evolve. Here, we're looking at the massive 2016 Hurricane Matthew. The red line shows the observed track of the hurricane. The contours show the AI prediction. The black dots show how closely the actual path of the hurricane followed that prediction. The white cones show the NOAA forecast. Being able to accurately predict the behavior of complex weather systems around the world is a key step
Wow.
in building a digital twin of the Earth.
Yeah.
That's
So
really
like,
interesting.
yeah,
Maybe
it's
I have a
very cool.
question
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
jump in there. I just have one question. So what, maybe like a high level overview of that. What is the model learning like essentially like on this like very small like neural scale, is it learning over that short period of time how the hurricane is moving and extrapolating that almost? That's what's
I
learning.
do not know the full details of the paper. I was not actually on that paper, so I will probably not comment. But it's what I would say that it's kind of like the FNOs are meant to learn like an autoregressive task, basically, in the sense that you've been learning over a certain period of time. You're kind of predicting the next kind of time steps that could be a 6 hour day, 2 days, and all this. And so you're kind of learning that kind of mapping in an autoregressive
Sure.
manner. Because the position of this kind of discretization invariance and all, we could kind of train on many different resolutions and test on different resolutions is kind of a very important factor. This Fourier transform layer kind of learns kind of the global features, which is kind of important. So I think that's kind of the thing. I don't know much about this paper because I don't primarily work with like weather forecasting also. So I will not comment to give like wrong advice there. So I'll just leave it at that point.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I think you can summarize it to say that it definitely learns to an
Yes,
extent that is not capable of human or previous model.
for sure.
It like you in that video you saw the NOAA prediction was
Yes.
significantly off compared to what the FNO was predicting.
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
that's really
there
interesting.
are also models right now which are much better, right? There's also this graph casting. So the whole Google DeepMind, they don't use neural operators. They have some kind of other mappings like graph neural network, graph forecast net, and all this other stuff. So they're also really good. But I think this is kind of a fully fledged like AI model. So the
Yeah,
DeepMind ones, the Google DeepMind ones are hybrid solvers. They have like kind of numerical plus machine learning. We are fully AI based in the sense.
right.
So that's
Okay.
kind of another key distinction basically to keep track.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a great like deep dive into neural
Exactly.
operators. I think
For sure.
there's a lot of stuff that, I'll definitely need to take a look at again and definitely take a look at your colleague's website there because that was really interesting. I think it's really cool. So so maybe let's take a step out. I think we'll touch back on neural operators a couple times here, but I just have some more like general questions for you about
Sure.
math and AI in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So one question that I was thinking of while we were discussing there, have you ever touched on the idea of like LSTM or like long short-term memory and these other types of AI models?
Yeah.
So you talk about, taking uh scenes of a video and predicting the next frame. If I'm not mistaken, that sounds very similar to the task of what an LSTM might be trained to do.
Yeah.
So what makes it different from LSTM? I do understand that LSTM would be taking in those discrete points versus the function, but maybe you could go a little more in depth onto that.
Yeah, so okay, so I guess the analogy where I gave there was just an example of like how I was talking about FNOs. I mean, we don't give in the video, we give in like tiny snapshots of a frame basically. So I do know about LSTMs and RNNs and all this kind of log. So again, the point is they're just again neural networks where learn mappings between inputs to outputs. You actually so even though LSTMs and RNNs can do autoregressive tasks, basically like you can predict the next time step. Again, you can't train and test on different resolutions. If
Right.
you actually train the speedy solver data on actually LSTMs and RNNs, you actually don't do well. Secondly, you also need to know that it depends on your hidden state, like how big is your hidden state capacity for your RNNs and LSTMs. So there's a lot of like bottlenecks in our RNN and LSTMs. I haven't personally played around with them a lot, but I studied them in my undergrad and grad courses in machine learning, so I do know about them a lot. It's just that again, they're not a specific good task, like a key network for like solving PDs. Basically, they cannot learn it well. The underlying operator is, I mean, they never go into the Fourier domain or can try like learn some
Right.
different
I
kind of
think
kernel. Yeah,
they're very constricted models. I think the thing that I feel like we keep coming back to like implicitly is this idea of flexibility and elasticity, which is something that, the way that you describe it is very, very exclusive to these neural operators due to the fact that they're working with functions rather than discrete
exactly.
points.
And also
So
primary LSTMs and RNs have been used for like kind of word tasks, like for like text or like for like sequence modeling and such like that. I mean, they're amazing at those tasks, right? But just not for like kind of PDE tasks. I think they have people who have done work on using LSTMs and RNs for PDs. I haven't looked into that, so I won't comment on that. But like at least for our group, we want to finally focus on building these advanced like neural operator architectures, which are very more general, right? That's more important for us.
okay. So I think three more questions here.
Sure.
So um and I do think there might be a timer on Zoom that we might have an issue with, but if we do get closer to that, I'll let you know.
Sure.
But
Oh,
for
I
right
see.
now, I
I
think,
think it says 8 minutes left. Yeah.
yeah, I think we'll be fine for right now. But if it does come close, I'll just close this out and we'll make a new meeting for 5 minutes or
Sure.
whatever it needs to wrap up here. So here's my first question that I had, like a general question.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts, right? We talk about differential equations, all these like in the current state of what your guys' research is working on and just general the state of AI and math, there's a lot of and I think we're kind of shifting from science to math now, talking
Mhm.
about lean and all these things.
Yes.
What would you say are like the potential for AI to maybe discover new mathematical ideas, maybe theorems or even proofs that humans haven't considered, or like through avenues that humans haven't really thought of yet? Is that a feasible thing to think of or within the future?
Yes, for sure. I think, I mean, you saw the recent DeepMind paper. I mean, like it got a silver medal in the IMO. I think that was amazing. I mean, with scale, obviously, like these models, and like you do a lot of like AlphaZero technique where you kind of learn a lot of like uh premises and theorems on the fly in the sense and prove theorems.
Right.
I think like AI for math will be a very big field in the future. I think there's a lot of already good competition people have been going into a lot, especially from our group. I think we are interested in formalizing all these theorems and proving them. And it's a very big step for mathematicians, right? I mean, like in my undergrad, when I do a lot of proofs or right now as well, right? I would like to have a system which can actually every step of my proof is formalized and I know it's factually correct, means there's no mistakes in that proof. And I think that's a very big thing about discoveries of new theorems and premise, like new theorems is and like proofs is kind of something um, hard to think about, right? I mean, like I think it's gonna grow. Like the AI will like once you keep on scaling these models with more data, you can kind of prove new theorems and such like this. But I don't know about new discoveries of math. Now that's kind of new discoveries of conjectures is a very different topic. I don't think AI can do that for at least well, I don't know. Like it's hard for me to say right now because I'm not completely like an expert in the field, so I don't really want to comment. But I think maybe in a year or two, I don't think so. Like there'll be new kind of maths formed. It's very hard. I mean, it basically means you have to kind of take the whole kind of world of math and try to compress it and try to come up with new ideas. Um, but
Wouldn't you
proving theorems,
say,
yes, yes.
wouldn't you say
Sorry.
to an extent that that's what LLMs are doing? They're taking the whole world of language and compressing it
Yeah,
down. So
sure.
I'm
Yeah,
just
but yeah. Go
I
ahead.
think
Sorry.
I think I think this is a very hard that's a very hard question to answer right now, considering how fast AI is moving. So I think,
Yeah.
I'm just your thoughts on it. I don't really expect like a concrete answer here.
Yeah, I think for sure for theorem proving and all, it'll be very fast. I mean, already we can see IMO. I'm sure OpenAI probably is trying to get a goal right now, coming with
Right,
some new model or
right.
something like that. So that for sure. I mean, our group also is working on that. But I think about discovering new conjectures and all, that is probably hard. Like
Okay.
that would, I mean, if someone has the time to do a scale up and all, probably you can do that. But I don't think like actual new conjectures and theorems which are actually useful for mathematicians is what I'm trying to say, not just random stuff. Like I mean, you can just ask an LLM right now to just generate some random theorem, can probably generate. Probably not true, probably factually true. We don't know, right? You need to double check. But which is useful for a mathematician, like is pretty hard to
Right.
convince. Like
Okay.
I think there are
So
many
maybe
famous
in the
mathematicians.
future, maybe, but
Maybe,
unlikely or unlikely in the current state.
yeah.
Okay.
I think though right now
So
unlikely for sure.
yeah. So okay, two more questions, 4 minutes.
Sure,
So maybe we gotta like
sure, sure,
maybe hustle up, but I think we'll be fine here.
sure.
So this question kind of stems off that. How do you envision like the role of human mathematicians and AI? Like how do you envision the role of human mathematicians and AI in terms of collaboration, the different roles like as
Mhm.
AI gets more capable in mathematical reasoning and problem solving?
I think it's going to be a very collaborative role, basically. Every time like you can take any famous mathematician like Terence Star or something like that. As soon as they try to state a theorem in lean and all, you can ask this AI thing to prove it. If they can't prove it, then you can kind of the mathematician itself can kind of prove some of the steps, and then you can ask it to fill out generate the next tactics or
Sure.
just suggestions. It'll be like a lean co-pilot kind of thing in this sense, which are tools already developed.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very collaborative. I think it's going to speed up a lot of kind of progress because once you have formulas, everything lean is perfect or any other like formal language. I think it'll be like kind of like a human feedback, right? I mean, mathematicians ask AI for some help. AI can kind of give feedback or like do some unnecessary tasks which are not important, like some sub steps of a proof which are very trivial to prove. You don't want to waste time proving it again. You can just ask the AI to prove it, right? So
An
that kind of
intern.
it's like exactly like it's going to be like those kind of uh stuff like that. Like I think it's going to be super collaborative. I mean, it's already as collaborative right now it is. So yeah, that's
Right.
basically my thought.
Okay, for sure. Um, and yeah, so okay, yeah, I think those are primarily my questions. I think uh funny enough, your description of the neural operators kind of banged out all of the questions that I had about neural
Oh,
operators. So that was it's a very in-depth explanation. I really appreciate that.
thank
So
you. No worries. Thanks.
so, okay, so yeah, last question here to wrap it up. So from your perspective, right? I read that you worked at DeepMind, Microsoft, and you're now at Caltech. Work like I think Caltech is like top rated for math and definitely
Yeah.
CS. So from your position, right? I know you touched on this before about flexibility, but what advice would you give to like aspiring students interested in pursuing a career in AI and math, maybe?
I would say be curious to learn, be curious to like willing to like explore other stuff. I think passion is really important and hard work. I think those are some of the key things to, especially if you want. I feel like having a strong mathematics foundation is especially important to doing AI. I don't think you should just be doing like lead coding all day just for getting like into a
Right,
fad
right.
or like just like trying to go under the AI hype like LLMs and all. I think having a strong math foundation is very crucial because if you
Sure.
have a strong math foundations, you can kind of just apply your skill set to every field. Like you can change domains anytime you want, go into quant if you want to make money or do whatever like you want. But I
Right.
think for research wise, I think it's very important to like try to explore as much as you can in your undergrad and high school. I think that's very important. Explore because an undergrad is for breadth and just have fun in research. I think research is
Sure.
fun in a way. Don't like get disappointed. Like if you're feeling stressed or something, just ask for help and your peers basically. I
Okay.
I think it's a very exciting time to be in AI and math and such like this. I think I'm sure all of you have great futures ahead of you. So yeah, I wish
Sure.
you all.
Yeah, right. Well, I thank you so much for all your time
No worries. Thank
today.
you so much for having me.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for all your insight. I really appreciate your
For
advice
sure.
too. And yeah,
Thank you.
definitely, definitely interested in your work, so maybe you can stay in touch. So
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Have
yeah,
a great day,
thank you.
Mihir.
Yeah, you
Thanks.
too. Have a nice day.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.